screams in the night. Indian legends. Miles of footprints. Sightings. What are these elusive hominids that stalk the wilderness? Join us for eyewitness accounts, questions and answers, Bigfoot encounters of the past, and ongoing encounters in the present. Your host, two-time witness, field researcher for 43 years, William Jevning. Welcome to the mystery. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Creek Devil. We're doing things a little bit differently with this episode. We have, of course, Brian and Tom and Sean in Nebraska on the panel today. We're going to just kind of do a general discussion, and I don't know, Sean, if you have any updates from your area in Nebraska, but the reason we're doing things a little differently this week is we have a much longer show with Brenda Harris midweek, so we're going to mix it up a little bit. This show will be this discussion plus Jim's narration for the week, and then we're going to do a special show on Wednesday with Brenda. So, fellas, how are you this morning?
Good, Will.
Good, very good, thank you.
I'm not sure what direction we're going to go in. I guess we can start with the Q&A, or Sean, do you have any updates from your region?
Since the time I was on your show, yeah, a few things. Let's see here. Trying to put things in order. I did go rifle hunting with a friend of mine, and this is a few farms over from where I saw the one, and I had told him about it, and there's a lot of structures, like crazy structures in this area and blinds and stuff. I think I might have sent you some pictures of that, but I did hear a big, goofy owl that sounded more like a monkey. But, and another thing, there was roadkill. I just wanted to see what would happen. Somebody had ran over a little buck, so I drug that buck down to the tree line and just set it right inside the trees. A few days later, it was gone. So that's pretty weird. There was no, I mean, you know, when a coyote will get into an animal like that or whatever, there's going to be fur or something left. There's going to be something there. But there was nothing. It was picked up and taken away completely. So that's about it, really.
You know,
I haven't heard anything. I haven't been down there too much.
Okay. I'm curious. I want to go back to something you mentioned. You heard a kind of a crazy-sounding owl that sounded more like a monkey. Can you elaborate on that? What differences, or what made you think that?
Well, this is before the sun even came up. You don't hear owls like that in the morning like that anyway, but the sun hadn't even come up yet. Me and my buddy were in a blind together. He's not an experienced hunter, and I just wanted to help him get a deer, so I wasn't really hunting. I was just with him, basically, and it didn't sound far away from us at all, maybe 20 or 30 yards in the trees and down in this creek. It sounded just like the recordings that Don Gumow has. He actually sent me some of those, and it's the same thing. It's exactly the same. It's creepy. It's so similar. It's not an owl, for sure. So I'm pretty sure that's, you know, them doing whatever they do just to freak me out.
Hey, Sean, how loud was the sound?
It was very loud. I mean, not like booming loud like when I heard the scream, but it was not far from us at all. Yeah, like I said, it was 20 or 30 yards to our west and down in the creek bottom. I could hear it distinctly right behind us and down in that creek. And on this creek bottom too, I think these guys travel these canals and creek bottoms and riverbeds. That's how they get back and forth, I think. So.
Hey, Sean, I got a quick question on that owl, because I've heard one time I heard an owl that I thought was really suspicious. It didn't sound like an owl at all.
Right.
The one that I heard was kind of a monotone, and normal owls have a kind of a sort of a pleasant sound to them. It's a little bit spooky, but it's, I think it's kind of, lack of a better word, it's kind of a woodsy sound. This thing that I heard sounded like a real poor imitation, and again, it sounded like it had a lot of air volume behind it. Was yours sort of monotone, or how was it different
No, it was it was pretty monotone, and it was loud. And towards the end of it, there was more of a like a lack of better words. It sounded like a monkey at the end.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty much what you just described, but there was a little bit more to it.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm just curious. I just heard it one time, and again, it's kind of a monotone. It sounds like yours was similar, except I didn't get the monkey at the end.
Yeah. It kind of had not a woof, but kind of, I don't know how to describe it. It just sounded like a monkey at the end of the hoot. Don Gummo, he's got the exact same thing recorded. If you you could text message him or give him a call, and he'll send it to you via text, and you can listen to it. That's pretty much exactly what I heard.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe we can post that recording of Don's on the website, creekdevil.com.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Sean, going back to the deer for a second, do you know of any department of whatever that may have picked up the deer, or is that is that common for?
Oh, sure.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, people pick up dead deer if they're fresh and take them home and butcher them because we're out in the country out there. But no, it wouldn't be the Department of Roads or anything like that. This is rural Nebraska, and where I drug it, you could not see it from the road. I drug it pretty far in and on the edge of this tree line, so there's no way you could have seen it from the road.
Brian,
I believe this is a corridor. I believe this is a corridor where they travel, going back and forth and doing whatever they do. A buddy of mine was down there bow hunting, and he shot a deer one night, and we went and tracked it in the middle of the night. Man, that was spooky. Knowing those guys were in there and traveling through that thick stuff at night, it freaked me out. But and we lost the deer. So, and that's another weird thing. The blood just stopped, and the deer was gone. And that was down in the river bottom, too. It went down into the creek, and it was just gone. So I suspect that one of them could have snagged that up and taken it away, too. But,
if the blood trail ended like that, it was just picked up and taken.
That's what it seems like.
Yeah,
but who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was another thing that happened to me that I totally forgot about until I heard another interview with another guy. I can't remember who it was. Oh, maybe it was Mike Woolley. I think it might have happened to him. I had a young doe one time in the tree stand where the bark was ripped off by the young one that I talked about in the last show with Will. I had a young doe run in there one afternoon and just sit down right underneath my tree stand. And she knew I was there, too. It looked like she had been rammed, but that's something I never talked about before with you. And I just kind of put it together after I heard the Mike Woolley story. So that's another kind of weird thing that happened. But anyway.
Yeah, I think sometimes deer will run towards people for protection.
Yeah, that's weird. Yeah, I couldn't figure it out. It was I'm usually a meat hunter, and normally I kind of would have, I thought about shooting her several times, but I just couldn't do it. It was too easy. It just didn't seem right. She knew I was there. She was looking right at me. It seemed like she was wore out. And after being there for 30 or 40 seconds, she just fell asleep. She just nodded right off.
When you say nodded off, you mean she went to sleep or she took off?
She was ran. It looked like she was ran hard, and it was too early in the season to be the rut, so it wasn't being chased by a buck. She looked like she had been ran. She was tired. She laid down and curled up like in the fetal position, put her head down, and she seemed to be sleeping like within a minute. I mean, it was really fast. And that's another thing. I couldn't see shooting her like that. It just wasn't cool. Would have been cool. I would have not been happy with myself. So that's pretty much it. That's all I got for Nebraska.
Okay. That was a very odd situation with a deer. I mean, that's not something you see every day.
No. It was really weird. I did post something on Facebook to a Nebraska hunting and fishing bragging board, just asking people, and I knew I was going to take a lot of hits for this, but I just asked them the general question, has anybody had any kind of experience with a Bigfoot? And the ridicule I got was, well, you can imagine, it was crazy. But I did get 5 people that contacted me over Facebook Messenger, and 3 of these people seem like pretty good witnesses. I still haven't done a full-on sit down and talk to these people. I want to go have coffee with them or something and kind of feel them out and see what really happened. So I got that coming up here. I'm going to get back on that pretty quick. I've been pretty busy this summer, but summer's about over. So.
Oh, don't say that.
Oh, that's all right. I welcome the fall. It's been miserable hot. I like it when it cools down a little bit. Early fall is my favorite time of year.
Well, I guess we can launch into some questions, fellas. I don't know, Brian or Tom, whichever you guys want to start. But and Sean, jump right in with questions.
Sure.
Okay, well, I got a question. Last week when we talked to Brenda, she was talking about how the police and even the Navajo police, when people told them of encounters and strange things happening, the police refused to investigate. And would you say that, and this doesn't just apply to Brenda's area, but overall throughout the country, would you say that it's more common that law enforcement, they don't take the report seriously because they think, oh, they're just telling a crazy tale, the Bigfoot doesn't exist, they're just crazy, they take it seriously that way? Or is it because they do know exactly what it is, but they don't want to make a big thing of it? They don't want, maybe for professional reasons, they don't want to go out there and investigate. They don't want to have their reputation tainted.
Yeah, I think in law enforcement terms, it's kind of a career killer if you go looking for Bigfoot. At least it used to be. And of course, on the reservations with Native Americans, like what Brenda mentioned, because of what they're taught about these things, and it's fairly common among reservation areas that they will not, go out when they get these calls.
And would you say it's also common that for a lot of law enforcement, maybe not in the Native American law enforcement, but other law enforcement agencies around the country, maybe they don't take the report seriously just because they think, oh, you must have saw a bear or something like that. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, I think that's pretty typical.
I want to back up a little bit on that because I've listened to some earlier shows before Creek Devil, Witness of the Unknown, and it seemed like there was a couple of incidents where law enforcement, and this was up in the state of Washington, I don't remember the lady who it was, but I think there was 2 or 3 episodes that you had recorded with her, and the law enforcement just did, they finally, she called them, they finally showed up, but they just did a very brief, cursory examination of the property and then just got out of there. And I think her impression was that they knew what this thing was and they wanted nothing to do with it. That maybe they're afraid of having an encounter with it.
Yeah,
Any thoughts on that? Or?
Yeah, we get that in places, where their behavior is a little bit more than just the cursory. And I'll give you an example. When I talked to the Goldhammer family with Yakult back in '89, they had called 911, and a sheriff's deputy came out, and it was obvious to them that he didn't put any stock in their story whatsoever. So he just sort of made it look like he was doing an investigation, but they could tell he really wasn't. Whereas some of the other people, the behavior of the law enforcement officers is a little more serious, but there is that measured, behavior towards what they're doing, like they don't want to really get involved in it because they know what's there.
Yeah, and I just now remembered also going back. It may have been, I think it was Lee that was talking about in California that they had a problem with one of these things on the property, and the law enforcement showed up. And you remember this? And they, the kind of the key phrase that I picked up on was, they said he had never mentioned what it was. He just called it a transient And they said, yeah, well, we know where it comes out at. And they were really unmotivated.
Yeah,
they were
not the term he or she, but it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they knew what it was, or they had a pretty good idea.
And sometimes those terms are almost code for, they're trying to put off on the witness what it is they're discussing, using the term transient. But then you pick up clues like that when instead of he or she, it's it.
Yeah. So it almost sounds like maybe in some areas, maybe some active areas, and I'm just looking for maybe a comment on this. I wonder if in those areas, if the law enforcement actually do know what it is, and they're a little bit of trepidation about going out and doing investigation.
Oh, hold on.
Yeah, while Will's taking care of that, Tom, yeah, I agree. I think that probably is a common sentiment that a lot of police officers face, or a lot of organizations face when they hear about these things. They know what it is, but they just don't want to investigate.
Sorry about that,
Yeah,
fellas.
just with Brenda, I think she sort of mentioned that some of the reservation, the tribal police, were very hesitant, because they are policemen, but they had their tribal teachings, and there's that 7-year rule, or if you see one, you die within 7 years. And I've actually heard that before, that if different variations of that. This is something we're going to bring up with her. I would like to talk to her about, and that is, well, there may be a 7-year rule, but I'm not good at math, but her first encounter was in 1988, and she's still alive.
But she didn't look it in the face. See, that's the thing. You're not supposed to, if you're a native, you're not supposed to look them in the eyes.
Oh, okay.
Oh, man.
Sorry about that, fellas. That was actually Lee, for those who remember our guest a while back. I have to call him back. I didn't know he was going to call me. So, about the police thing, quickly. I've had a number of police officers tell me across the country that their particular organization has had code words for these things, and one of the examples was, brown cow. If they got a call that there was a brown cow, they knew that was what they were talking about, was these things. So in certain locations, they'll have a code word for them.
So they do know. So in those locations,
Many places they do, yes.
okay.
In addition to that, though, not only are they maybe hesitant to go out there and investigate because of fear of what they might do, but also I think there's, at least in some places, there's got to be an element of they don't want publicity in their town. They don't want these things to be known so that people come out there and harass the town, I think. Would you agree, Will?
Sure, and you get all kinds of people, especially if something was made public. You get everybody in the world that wants to go see Bigfoot out looking, in that location. And it disrupts people's lives and their property and things like that. So, certainly they want to prevent that. Plus, possible negative publicity it brings to the town or location.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I hadn't thought about that, because I think, I don't know, but I think the 911 calls and most of that stuff is probably a public record.
Right.
Yeah, okay, so somebody could, peruse through it, and it's all, so really they don't have any choice. It's to be responsible, they would have to have code words.
And it's interesting, too, on the 911 calls. I had a detective contact me one time, and the gist of the story was there was a lady hiking. She encountered one of these things close up. It bared its teeth at her and I think growled. You can imagine her reaction. She reported it, called 911, and the detective worked in an office where there were some joint agencies, and one of them was a federal, I think, Forest Service or one of those entities, and the situation was handed over to that individual because it was outside of their jurisdiction, the police jurisdiction. So the detective asked the guy if he would update him on, what happened after he talked to the witness. And when he came back, he got a very much cold shoulder response from this guy who was a friend. And then when he went back and checked the 911 records, they'd been cleansed of this call, which is not legal, but it was
I was going
done.
to say, yeah, right. That's against protocol. Wow.
So the reasoning for that is unknown.
Interesting. Hey, Will, I got another question. Talking to Richard yesterday, he mentioned that he has heard tree knocks, but the really intriguing thing about this, though, just as we hear how these creatures will mimic or imitate people's voices, what Richard said is that the tree knocks were occurring in places, I think this was at night when he heard these, but he was hearing these tree knock sounds from places where there are no trees, which he kind of implied that maybe these things make those noises, maybe vocally.
With their mouths, yes. I remember Richard talking about that. Tongue pops, yes. He said that there was no hard wood in those locations where those vocals were coming from. So his thought was, what about tongue pops? And I agree with that. That's something that does occur.
Yeah,
I think they do both.
Mm-hmm. Could be, yeah.
I think they hit trees and they do tongue pops. I think they do both. I can do the tongue pop thing pretty loud myself, and that's something I've been thinking about lately since that idea was introduced that they might be doing tongue pops. It makes sense. It really does. But I've heard wood knocks that were definitely wood knocks too. So
and there are things that other primates do, with their mouths vocally that aren't necessarily made with their vocal cords. It could be, those kinds of noises. So it's within reason.
teeth clicking.
Yes, exactly.
They're crazy animals.
Yeah, I was, when you said teeth clicking, I was thinking teeth clicking, bone crunching.
Sure, there's lots of things they could be doing.
Yeah.
All you have to do is look at what chimps and gorillas and orangutans do. And did you guys see, on that point, there was a picture I saw yesterday of an orangutan. He was in a tree over water, and he had what looked like a spear fishing.
No.
They were talking about it, as another sign of tool use, very similar to humans.
Oh, sophisticated tool use. Where was this, Will?
I think it was Borneo.
Okay. Wow. So if they do it, and I think it's reasonable to assume that my understanding is Sasquatch it's far more intelligent than chimps, orangs, and gorillas.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Well, and that's something our anthropologist John asks me all the time. What do we have for evidence of tool use? And it might be things that we simply wouldn't recognize as tool use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say, we tend to think of them hunting down deer, breaking their necks, maybe biting their necks, and then breaking their necks. But I wonder sometimes if they use tools to kill their prey as well. Even like things such as like throwing rocks or taking some type of tool, like a spear-like tool, and stabbing them that way.
Yeah, I think it's very possible. And we always hear about them throwing rocks and things. The witness we talked to recently, who was sent, I didn't. Let me think about that. I didn't record him, I don't believe yet. I told you guys about this story. Let me back up at that in a minute. There was a story from a gentleman who contacted me about a week or two ago, and he was put in a situation where he was sent into a location by a law enforcement officer, and it was a situation where he didn't know what he was getting into. The guy didn't like him. He was trying to leave town, and the officer picked him up and was giving him a lot of grief, and he took him out to this location in the forest and told him to go down this particular draw or he'd shoot him. So obviously he took off down through the draw, and as he proceeded down this slope, there were rocks being thrown at him. Not big ones at first. He turned around. He said the cop was still up there, and so he was motioning for him to keep going. So as he kept going, and the rocks started getting a little larger and a little more intense, and then he saw a truck across from where he was, the direction he was going. So as he ran down the slope, waving his arms at this truck, the truck driver stopped and he gets out and he says, what's going on? What are you doing? All this stuff. And at this time, the rocks were baseball size coming at the truck. And it actually crashed through a couple of the windows in the truck. They both got pretty frightened. They couldn't see the creatures. Apparently, there were a couple of them behind this brush, and all they could see was their arms and hands throwing these rocks pretty hard at the truck. They got in the truck and they took off. So there's a couple of interesting things there. Did the police officer know he was trying to send this guy to his death? And what was the point of them throwing all these rocks that hard at the truck and actually causing, a fair amount of damage to it?
That's kind of interesting because, a rock. I mean, let's think about it. If any given enough velocity, I mean, look at a piece of lead. At 2,200 feet per second, that'll kill something. And a rock, I mean, you could have something the size of a golf ball, and if you heft it fast enough, it would certainly kill a deer or a man.
Well, and here's something to think about in terms of expending a lot of energy. Now, you could have a quick burst of energy and hopefully catch your prey. It wouldn't take as much energy to throw a large rock and incapacitate the prey and then, go over and grab it. I know when I was in the Army, part of my job was, if you're going to attack an enemy, you get mobility kills on armored vehicles, knock their tracks out, things like that, then you can pick them off at your leisure. So it's sort of the same principle.
Sure. Yeah, you could knock somebody unconscious or break their leg or break an animal's leg, and then they're all yours. You're right. You'd expend minimal effort at that point to go over there and finish the job.
Yeah, it's a mathematical calculation when it comes to survival. You want the least amount of energy expended, the most amount of energy consumed, so you would employ techniques that would accomplish that.
Where was this guy? What state was this guy in?
It was Washington State.
Okay.
He didn't want me to give out too much information because he's still afraid of the person that he told me about.
Yeah, I bet.
Sean, any questions? Oh, go ahead, Brian.
Oh, I was just going to say, now this is more of kind of maybe a speculation rather than a question, but I guess if you look at gorillas, aren't gorillas' hearts in different location than a human's? I wonder if, isn't their heart closer to their, further up in their chest? Do you know offhand?
I don't know offhand. I'd have to check that out, but it's possible. I mean, I don't know, though.
Yeah,
right, that's a really good question because that was something I brought up either last week or the week before, and I didn't know if it was urban legend or what, but I had heard that the necropsy was performed on one of these creatures. Yeah, and they found the heart not in the same place as a human, but kind of like maybe under the armpit or something. So,
yeah, that's what I heard.
I'd heard that before.
Yeah, well, that's we should look into that and find out if chimps or gorillas, if their anatomy is different in that sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible because they are a different species, so it could be slight variations. They're not going to be identical. No primates are identical because, the morphological differences. But
well, specifically, if say one were killed and their body examined, what differences would you say there would be between the human body and theirs? I mean, obviously, you would say their leg structure would be different, right? Their
overall bone structure is going to be very different.
Their arms will be longer.
Yeah, when you look at their arms, the forearm is longer proportionally than ours is, and the same with the thigh, where the thigh is longer than ours, and the shin bone is shorter. So the structure is very different, which also probably accounts for the running on all fours occasionally. That's a better design for something like that.
Yeah, and would you say that the vast majority of your accounts that you hear about, they describe them as having virtually no neck, like the head just sits on the shoulders, essentially?
They've always been that way for as far back as you can go. Mm-hmm. It's rare, to have an encounter with somebody who says they've seen the neck or the head to be able to turn without the upper body turning.
And that applies for all 4 types?
Yes. Although I think the type 4, because they're smaller, might be a little different, but we haven't got a great deal of information on them either yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I got a question, kind of talking about the different body types. And I think I've asked this before. I'm just curious, though. What are your thoughts about, we hear these stories that these creatures have been shot multiple times, maybe with a shotgun or maybe with a 30-06, and they just, excuse me, it has no effect, no immediate effect. It's not the caliber or shot placement so much as the volume.
Well, a lot of it has to do, I mean, of course, we're talking about something with great size and thickness to it, but also the muscle density is much higher than ours. You know, a lot of people think about these things and they never consider muscle density. And that's something my sources told me about. And they rejuvenate quicker than we do. Of course, that wouldn't help in a gunshot, except afterwards, but the muscle and bone density is much higher than ours.
Okay. Excuse me. Yeah, and
that kind of gets into another thing, though, when you talk about that, like, what do you take in the field for safety? I mean, you always want to go with a partner, but what do you want to take for protection? I think that's something to talk about too.
A rocket launcher.
Well, I've got a few brush guns, and I carry a 10 millimeter with heavy loads. I also have a shotgun, and it kind of just depends on where I'm going as to what I'll be taking. But I think those are 3 pretty good options. The sidearm is always with me,
right,
just in case the shotgun or the brush gun fails. But a 45-70 with heavy loads is going to kill. I don't care how big the animal is; it's going down.
Right.
You aim for center mass, whether the heart's in the armpit or wherever it is. You put a few holes in its chest, and it's going to go down. I guarantee it.
well, they make those buffalo bore rounds.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, 45-70. Yeah.
You know, I think
That's
a lot
exactly
of
what
times
I'm talking about.
with guns, it's like cameras. You know, I've talked to many hunters. In fact, there was a gentleman I spoke to recently who was a former Army Ranger, combat veteran, lots of experience with special operations, and he had a close encounter. He thought he was walking up on an elk, or a bear, excuse me. He thought he was walking up on a bear. I mean, close. And this thing stood up and walked away, and he heard another noise in the brush close by. So there were multiple creatures there, and just like many people, he didn't you know, he was frozen in fear, didn't know what to do, didn't think about the gun, and this happens over and over and over again. You know, having the presence of mind to actually pull whatever it is, whether it's a camera or a gun, up and shoot. Might be a different story altogether. You know, people can armchair quarterback this to death, but when you're in that situation, it's something completely outside. And he said, like other veterans I've talked to, combat veterans, having experience with one of these things paled their combat experience in terms of fear.
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine.
Didn't you or somebody else before say that if you ever find yourself in a situation and for self-defense, that maybe the first place to try to shoot, though, is in its eyes, like one of its eyes?
Well, I mean, if you're in a horrible situation where you were being attacked, that's where I think I'd want to have a 12 gauge shotgun with double out buckshot, and you shoot it in the face, because then you got a pretty good chance of knocking its eyes out. And getting yourself out of it. You might not be able to kill something, but you can get yourself out of that situation. I would recommend against shooting one, because there are other techniques you can use to get yourself out of the situation, like we had Gerald talk about. You know, he was by himself. He didn't realize he was by himself, but he started talking out loud like he was talking to other people, and things like that, and it threw him off. They didn't know how many people were there, so he was able to get himself to his vehicle and get out of the area. You know, having the compressed air cans with the horns, like you take sporting events, those kinds of things will scare these things off. They, for some reason, it kind of wigs them out. Smoking, you know, whether you smoke or not, take something along, and if you've got smoke coming out of your mouth and nose, it wigs these things out. It freaks them out. They don't know how to deal with that. So
I never heard that before.
That's a new one to me too. I knew about the air horn. Yeah, I take one with me every time. So
yeah,
I'll have to take a cigar too. I just got a box of really good cigars. I'm going to have to save a few for hunting season.
Right. That for whatever reason, it freaks these things out. They just don't know how to deal with that.
That's good to know.
You know, I went out yesterday with a buddy of mine and checking out two of my areas. And two of the primary tools that I carry are actually the air horn. And it even says on there it's an animal deterrent. And then the real animal deterrent, I'd never use it on one of these creatures. I'd rely on the air horn or something else. But we have a lot of mountain lions in the area, so both of us have pretty good size pepper spray. And statistically, the success on that against charging grizzlies is close to 90% as opposed to a sidearm. So that's not necessarily Bigfoot related, but it's something, at least here, we have to definitely got to be on the lookout because there's cat tracks everywhere.
Yeah, I would recommend carrying bear spray.
Yeah, and they're quiet. They're very quiet, so you want to look behind you frequently.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, you want to have eyes behind you.
That's another thing that just happened to me. We've got cats out here now. I've got 2 sets of tracks out where I hunt, and we're not supposed to have mountain lions here at all, but these are definitely cat tracks. So that's another sort of weird thing from Nebraska. And as far as the tools and stuff go, Will has a book called Bigfoot Fieldwork 101, equipment. It's not that expensive on Amazon. I picked it up, and it's got some really good, it's things that you should have with you in the field if you're studying or you're trying to find evidence of these guys in your area. I would suggest anybody out there listening to maybe pick this up on Amazon. It's a good read. Small, easy to get through.
I agree. I bought mine on a couple of years ago, and it's dog-eared now. It's all highlighted, and that's where I got the list for my equipment for field work.
Me too, but I can tell you that cigar is not in there, so keep listening to these shows because there's more stuff.
Well,
they need to be Cuban cigars too. Those are the best.
I'll give you an update on something. People have been bugging me. good friends have been bugging me about putting together a work, that's sort of a field guide, because there are field guides out there, but none of them are really that good when it comes to the Sasquatch. And part of that is going to include the things that you'll need to have with you to help protect yourself. So not just things, but behaviors as well. So I'm putting together a project with that now.
I know some rangers I can talk to see if we can get it in the ranger stations.
Yeah, and as far as it goes with, how the guy, the witness, was so freaked out. Well, he didn't know they were out there. I think that's part of the the paralysis. But if you're going into an area and you know it's active and you know these animals exist, which we all do, I mean, they walked right off the pages of myth into reality in our lives. We know that they're out there. So I believe, I would really sincerely hope that I would have the gumption to defend myself if one was attacking me and not just freeze up, because I know they're real, Yeah,
a lot of times.
I'm just hoping
people who
hoping
kind
that's in me.
Like my veteran friend, he always thought it was nonsense. The subject, knew about the subject,
right,
but just didn't believe in it until he walked right up on one. Then he had heard things for many years in the area and started putting 2 and 2 together with all these behaviors. So, yeah, I mean, that is true. But also there are situations, and I've mentioned this before, it was a story, it was funny, about my friend Jack and I were in the field, and we had talked about this at length, about being prepared, knowing what was out there and the circumstances of an encounter and how to properly document it film-wise and otherwise. And a bear ran out in front of us around 1 o'clock in the morning, heading back to our camp, and a little bugger was a year-old bear, not real big, maybe 100 pounds, was running its little tail off right in front of the SUV we were in, and both of us had camcorders in our hands. And after the bear took off after running about 100 yards or so, we stopped and said, holy crap, neither one of us got a picture. Now, had that been a Sasquatch, it would have been the same thing. It was kind of the, kind of a what the hell moment, and you're sort of in that moment, and then it's over before you react to it. Even though we had talked about this and prepared ourselves, we still couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I'm not even exactly right. I mean, that's when I heard the screaming last year. I sat there and listened and listened. I just strained my ears, listening because it was far away, listening to it. And when it was all done, I was like, oh no, I need to record this. And by that time, too late.
Yeah, I think that happens all too often.
Yeah, and actually, Will, is kind of a follow-up to that. One of the questions I was going to ask is, in terms of seconds, how long are most sightings? Because kind of like what you were just talking about how it's like the moment that it might occur to you, oh my gosh, let's take a picture, it's gone. So how would you say most sightings occur lengthwise in terms of seconds?
Many times it's just moments. It seems longer when you're in the moment, but I think because of the way we react to things, high stress situations, it sort of alters our perception of time, where it seems longer because our brain's trying to process what's going on. But in reality, it's just moments. So, I mean, I don't know without, just in my experience talking to witnesses, you're talking probably 15, 20 seconds tops.
Yeah, it's almost like you would have to have a camera in hands,
pointing at the object.
Exactly, and that's why
kind of like the Freeman footage when he knew they were in there and he had that camera rolling. So I mean, if you're not doing that, chances are it's going to be real tough to get it up and going once it starts happening.
Well, and with Freeman, I would use the Patterson example as a better one, because Freeman, I think, was hoaxed just by the way the creature. Yeah, because the creature walks like a human. It bobs up and down. That's a human.
I'll have to look at that again.
That's a human gait.
I always thought that was real. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, when you look at the Patterson film, even that wasn't very long. I think it was less than 60 seconds, and that's because the creature walked away from them across a large opening. And not very quickly, really. I mean, it looks relatively fast in the film, but the way Patterson and Gimlin described it didn't move away very quickly at all. It was, I guess, in terms of animal, moving away from a human. But had that been a normal encounter, which usually isn't in a big, wide open area, it could have been just 10 seconds. But even a minute is not a long time, and in that situation, Patterson, he did have the frame of mind to jump off the horse and grab, the camera out of the saddlebag. So it could have been more luck than anything in that situation.
Yeah, the reason why that footage was so long is because the creature intended for them to see her walk across, whether she was leading them towards something or leading them away from maybe the adolescents that were behind her. Perhaps.
Right. I mean, the creature could have turned to its left and disappeared in a couple seconds, but it did appear to purposely do that. So that's a rare situation, and they happen to be prepared with a camera, which is not always the case with people having encounters.
Yeah. Going back to Freeman for a second, aside from that video that you just talked about, do you know of any? I mean, what was his history? Besides that,
well, Freeman was an admitted and known hoaxer, so
I did not know that.
Oh yeah. He, in fact, one of his lines of tracks, they brought two professional trackers, two different companies in. The Forest Service did, and Bob Titmus went there along with those two gentlemen, and they judged. And I can't remember what year it was, but they judged the line of tracks to be hoaxed. And for a number of reasons. It wasn't because they weren't, judging the tracks based on human characteristics. They were judged fake because the track line would start and stop where it should have been continuous because of the material they were made in. And it wasn't the Sasquatch popping in and out of different dimensions, as it moved along.
Huh.
And there were places where the tracks, because of the mud depth, the tracks should have been about 10 inches deep in the mud. They were only an inch deep, where the men, of course, themselves sunk much deeper than the Bigfoot tracks. And there were places where, when you look at footprints, a living foot, when it moves through material, on the inside of the border of the footprint, where the foot moves, there will be pressure cracks. There were none in this case. Where there's a fixed object like a wooden foot or something like that, the pressure cracks will be on the outside, and that's what they found.
Well, that's disappointing. I didn't know that. I'm glad you told me, but it's kind of a bummer. I thought it was real.
Back in those days, he was a well-known hoaxer.
I did not know that. See, I'm still not like super knowledgeable about all these different things. I pick it up and I get real into it for a bit, and then I set it down and I got to go mow my lawn.
Well,
I'm a busy guy.
It is disappointing sometimes when the stuff that's out there. That's why if anybody looking at stuff that's out there has to take a look with a real critical eye.
That also adds value to the overall subject, to be able to discount and identify hoaxes and say, okay, that's not real. We can now scratch that off the list, and it helps us to more easily zero in, on the real stuff and say that is real. That's the real McCoy. So actually, I'm kind of glad that there's an ability, to go out there and know what to look for. Say, nope, sorry, that's not the real thing.
It does add value, and it also adds to credibility if you're able to discern between fake and real. And there's some people out there who claim they're experts that sort of buy into everything that's out there, and you can't do that. You have to be choosy about and have the reasons why something is either real or fake.
Well, and that's why I tell people, when they're skeptical. I was talking to a forest ranger yesterday, and we're talking about the subject, and she was very open to it, but I could tell she's skeptical. And I said, you should be. You need to be skeptical. And right up until the moment when you don't need to be. Then it'd be real handy to know what to do. And that's why I think that field guide would be good to, we're going to mention talking. Act like there's somebody else with you.
And there are things that I haven't mentioned on shows that I know about that I'll put into this work so that people have some techniques to use that have worked, in case after case after case, because I do get plenty of people who contact me who want to know how to get rid of these things when they come around their homes or if they're out and have an encounter. And I've only mentioned a few on the air, so because there are always people out there who want to take what I talk about and jump the gun and do the work before me, but what I have in mind is something very different. So I'm not giving all the information out, talking about it. Maybe we'll do that once I've published it. But
well, that's interesting. It's good to know that there's some tactics for self-defense, protection.
Right.
In the event of an encounter.
But Will, going back to hoaxes for a second, did you ever hear about they call it the 1977 Ben Coover Bus Hoax? Did you ever hear about it?
I don't think I'm familiar with that one. At Vancouver, BC or Vancouver, Washington?
Oh, I assume in, let's see here. I assume in Canada, but I guess in 1977 there was a bus full of people that saw the like a creature cross the road, and then later on they found out that the driver and two other people had planned this, and they had another friend that dressed up in a suit and then walked across the road, and they fooled all these people on the bus, and it made the newspaper headlines. And then later on they found out that the people planned it. That really, at least the three people planned it, and the fourth who was dressed up in the suit.
That's interesting. And I want to put this out there to everyone. I would really love to interview anyone who has done a hoax, and we'll keep you anonymous. But we just love to talk to somebody who's hoaxed. I think it'd be interesting. I mean, lots of us are practical jokers. I mean, I'm not going to put a suit on and go out and run around and do something like that. But, we talked about, I'm looking at a picture on my wall with a couple of my buddies. We did the Blair Witch thing when that was out camping. And, but stuff like that, is a funny little joke to play. But I would love to talk to someone, especially someone who has hoaxed footprints. I'd love to know the details.
I'd like to know exactly why. This is something that perplexes me. I was just asking about that footage that I find out it's fake. It bothers me. Why would anybody come forward with bullshit?
Well,
I don't get it.
I majored in psychology at WSU, and one of the courses we took sort of delved into that. There's all sorts of psychosis and things that go on with people. And one of those issues dealt with getting attention. And, most of us think if you want attention, it's going to be positive attention. But it's not always the case. If there's some sort of a mental problem with someone, for whatever reason, we're not talking negative or anything. I mean, it's negative if it's impacts a person's behavior, badly with others. But some people will seek attention regardless of whether it's a positive or negative feedback they're getting. They're simply getting what they need in the form of the attention. So I think in that case, that's what's going on.
And Will,
some people are just nuts because you look at people. There's one in particular, and I won't say his name, but he's got a YouTube channel and stuff. And he's all over Facebook and part of some of the same groups. I don't think he's part of the JRG. I don't think he's ever been admitted. No, he wouldn't be because I wouldn't let him. But he will take photos of rocks and videos of rocks and trees and this and that and talk to them like they're alive. And you wouldn't believe the people that follow this guy that think I don't know what they think. It's unreal.
There was a guy.
But I mean, I get crazy. Crazy makes sense to me because you have a legitimate excuse. You're nuts. But the guys that aren't nuts that do the hoaxing stuff, I mean,
well, there's so many.
I think they make everybody look bad.
There are so many degrees of mental issues, I mean, from person to person. It's really mind-boggling, So some of these guys, like I said, they're doing it for whatever needs they're trying to meet in themselves in terms of attention or what have you, and or it could be things like we talked about Ray Wallace in the Bluff Creek area. And originally he was very interested in what his crews were finding there and was very interested in this until, the original pioneer stepped in and sort of took over everything and kind of pushed him out. And then he claimed later that he faked all the footprints. And then when you look at his wooden feet, none of them matched the footprints that were found over that decade. So I think he was angry. I think he wanted his place in all of that, and that was maybe his way of trying to take away the credibility of those people.
Yeah. Hey, Will, I was just going to say that if any of our listeners out there are a psychologist that might want to lend some insight into this, into the mindset of what goes on, then we would love to have them on sometime.
Absolutely. I would love to get a psychologist's opinion about a number of these facets in this subject.
Yeah. Now going back. Yeah. Now going back to legitimate videos, though, what would you say outside of the Patterson video? Are there any videos out there that are, would you say, convincing, compelling evidence?
There are a few, I don't know, not real long ones or anything. There's one in particular I like, and I can't remember offhand where it's at. It happened in Canada. There was a family, I think they stopped by a river or something like that, and you look across there, they're sort of filming the snow and everything, and it looks like one was lying down and it gets up and walks off into the timber. To me, that looks real.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question, Brian. I've wondered that myself. And there's two videos that come to mind that I put in the category of they look convincing to me, but I don't have the expertise on it. both of them were shot in Russia, and one of them was two boys going through the snow, following some prints, and then they were filming, and then all of a sudden something took off large in the trees, and what made me think it was probably legit was the speed at which this thing moved.
Yeah,
And
that one's pretty interesting.
Okay. And then there was another one where it was a father and a son in Russia, and they were in the woods. It wasn't snowy, and the thing took off running. And I thought, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence on that one.
Yeah, I don't go comb through YouTube and look at all these things because there's so much junk out there. I don't have time to look at.
There's a lot of junk.
There's a lot of junk.
I've looked at a whole lot of it. There's one that I'm thinking of. It was in Alberta, Canada, and it shows I think these guys are loggers and they're on the edge of the road and they're pointing at this thing. They shine the camera over there anyway. It throws a tree, and it looks really good to me. But I don't know.
Are you talking about where the tree is thrashing back and forth?
No, this guy literally, I think he uproots a tree and he tosses it, and they say it's probably like a 12-foot tall tree. Like he throws it like a javelin, and it's a pretty big tree. And it looks real. It looks real, but I don't know. I thought the Freeman stuff was real, so I could be way off. I don't.
I saw
that one to me is pretty impressive.
Yeah, it looked like the tree. It wasn't just a tree. It wasn't like a kind of like a dead tree, maybe 12 feet or 12 or 15 feet in length, and it was angry at these oil workers.
Yeah, the oil workers. Maybe that's it. I thought they were loggers, but it could be oil workers. Yeah.
Yeah, and
it's on the edge of the tree line, and it picks this thing up and just wings it, and it looks
part
real.
of the thing that made me think possibly it was authentic is the response. You pick up the tone of voice and stuff from the onlookers, and it doesn't sound like it's rehearsed or it sounds like it's a genuine shock that they're, what the heck is that?
Right. That one in the IMAX footage where the IMAX crew accidentally filmed a Bigfoot and it looks like it might have a baby with it. I've seen that film dissected a few times, and those are my two that I really like, that, I don't know, seem to lend credibility to the subject. That's what I'm looking for. So I can, everybody thinks I'm nuts because I'm not shy about it anymore. I was at first. But if I can meet more people around here that have experienced anything like this, I want to converse with these people. So anybody listening out there, if you're in the Nebraska area and you want to go with me sometime, just find me on the JRG and I'll be happy to go anytime.
Yeah, Sean, you want to give out your contact info to folks that want to get in touch with you?
Oh yeah, sure. It's nebraskajrg@gmail.com, or I'm on the website too, the Facebook page, so you can find me there anytime. Email or Facebook, mail me, whatever, Messenger.
Yeah, for anybody who's not familiar with that, it's the JRG, the Jevening Research Group page on Facebook. And I should mention too that for anybody interested, you can look at my website, williamjevening.com, or for this show, creekdevil.com.
I like the new intro. The Creek Devil thing's pretty cool. It's pretty neat.
And we are going to be improving the show too. I mean, we recently went to this new format with Creek Devil. Typically we have a witness, and then the second segment is a Q&A, and then the third segment is Jim Sower's narrations of actual stories and accounts. And for anybody out there who is listening who wants to get a good voiceover person, Jim Sower is interested in getting into voiceover work. You can listen to his recordings, and we're doing a separate one. It's called Creek Devil Tales. Usually we add Jim's narrations to the show, to Creek Devil, but to help highlight him and his work, we've made a separate posting that's, Creek Devil Tales, and it's just the stories that Jim narrates. So check those out.
And also anybody that has had an encounter that would be interested in coming on and sharing their experience, we'd love to hear about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're always interested in having witnesses come forward. And folks, it really does help other witnesses out there. The veteran I mentioned, the reason he contacted us was because of other witnesses who talked about their encounters. And it's really helped him. When I first talked to him, he had a very difficult time talking about his experience. And as we talked afterwards, and other phone calls and texts and everything, it really took the burden off his shoulders, and he feels much better about it now. So it really does help.
Well, and
absolutely. It's a traumatic thing to see one of these things. It really messes with your head. And I can honestly say that after contacting you and talking to you personally on the phone a few times and then doing the show and getting to know some of these guys and making really good friends, too, in the JRG, I don't feel crazy anymore. You know, I mean, it does. It helps a lot. It really does.
We've actually done pretty well. We've attracted a really good group of people. I think we're around 1,850 people who are members of the Facebook page, but and also another couple thousand on WilliamJebning.com. You know, we're trying to get when David rebuilt my website, we had a section for a newsletter before, and David made some changes when he rebuilt the website. So it's now a JRG newsletter, and for anyone, not just people who are with the JRG, but if anybody wants to contribute to that newsletter that we'll send out once a month, you know, by all means contact us, and we'll put the articles together and post those newsletters. But it doesn't cost anything. It's all free. You know, you can sign up and get the newsletter. So we look forward to any participation.
Cool.
Well, I've got a gentleman here that listened to episode 21, the one that we posted today on YouTube. So he's obviously a subscriber on, I would imagine, Podbean. His question was that I think Brenda had mentioned the Billy Ape as a recent discovery. So his question is, why is the discovery of the Billy Ape and other newfound primates being promoted and shared among the world, whereas any evidence, excellent question, any evidence that's found about Sasquatch is covered up by scientists and officials. It gets ignored. Why would they promote these other primates and deny the existence of Bigfoot?
Well, I think part of it is when they discover things like the Billy Ape, they don't really have any choice but to, accept it. And it is more of it's a chimp, basically. So, it's not outside of their credibility world. I think with things with Bigfoot, and I hear this because I have contacts in Hollywood. Everything is the same that's out there, which is all basically a lot of nonsense. And everybody's afraid to delve into the world of nonsense because it really taints your career or your personality or your professional life, if you get involved in this. So I think they're staying away from it until one is actually produced.
I think Grover Krantz even mentioned that it affected his academic career, his advancement.
There was a song out, I think it was around 1980. It was called Lunatic Fringe. And
Yes.
Krantz adopted that title for this subject. And it was in reference to all these people, like the mind speak stuff and interdimensional and all this rubbish as the Lunatic Fringe.
Yep, that's Red Ryder that does that song.
Right.
That's a good song.
Well, and the Lunatic Fringe it pollutes the waters.
It does.
Of the legitimate.
It has a much bigger impact than people think it does, because that's what people see outside the subject seem to focus on. They look at the subject, they see this stuff, they say, "Oh well, that's what that subject is all about."
And I think, Sean, going back to the courage that you show when you talk to people, you just bring it up. A lot of people, when they hear it, they don't want to be associated with it because they feel that they're going to be, drug into this whole tabloid thing. But on the other hand, and I've experienced the same thing, is by being open and just talking about it. And also the way you talk to people is they sense your confidence and your conviction when you discuss the topic. That really opens doors. So, yeah.
I'm just not gonna. I think there's too many people out there, and especially since I've met all these people and talked to them, and I believe them. I mean, these the people that I've made good friends, like TW and Jeremiah. These are good, credible people, and somebody, it needs to just be known. And if we're hiding from it and acting like whatever. I mean, it's a real thing. It's out there, and I'm not gonna dance around it. If somebody's got something to say, they can say it, and we can talk about it. Or all of a sudden, the people that think these things are phony, they become really stupid. When these things are real, all the deniers seem like idiots to me.
Well, there's a groundswell, it feels like, of acceptance of the topic. And so more and more, and I personally kind of separate the skeptics into two different categories. One category is the majority of them, and I think they have every reason to be skeptical. I was skeptical at one time, and they should be. They have absolutely no reason whatsoever to step away from that until they do, until they get some evidence or they get somebody that they know that's credible, whatever the reason is. But then there's the other skeptic, and this is what I call the so-called professional skeptics, debunkers and scoffers. And I think they derive something from, their credibility. They think that they can basically ride on the coattails of so-called fringe topic and then be the expert or viewed as the expert. You see these guys on the TV shows and the documentaries, they get on there and they're like, well, listen, I know you saw what you saw, and this is a paraphrase of what they say. You saw what you saw. I wasn't there, but let me tell you what you really saw, okay? Because I'm actually in a very condescending way, I know more about this than you do. And I watch those guys and I think, I got two words for those guys, and they're not thank you.
Well, there's even a little more simplistic. When you look at the whole spectrum of the subject and everybody involved in it, or involved or not involved, I should say, just everybody who looks at the subject, you've got a very small margin on either side of the subject, which then those people will kind of belong in one group. You've got the believers and the debunkers. And they're equally destructive to the subject because one side believes anything and everything. The other side is just, like you said, they're trying to make themselves a name in debunking something that they really don't know what they're talking about. Then you've got this vast majority of people that are in the middle. And they're people that are kind of on the fence that don't really know either way. And it could take just a very small thing to tip the balance to whether they favorably view the subject or negatively view the subject.
Yeah, and there's another group of people. There's the knowers. It's not religion to me. I don't believe in these things. I just know they're there. They're there.
Yeah, I think
they're there.
I think the group of us that are in that category are something entirely different because all of us are sort of removed from that spectrum. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The knowers are the ones that, Sean, like you and I, and Will, and Brian, and all of us, when we discuss this with the majority in the middle, I think they pick up on the credibility and the conviction of somebody who discusses this with them, and that may be that bit of information that tilts them more towards the believing side than the disbelieving side.
And then, of course, you also get people. Occasionally, we'll get people on YouTube channel we get lots of people make comments. Some of them, I remove the dumb comments, and there were a couple recently, and I'm sure you look at these people's pages and they have one subscriber and don't have no content, so I think they're fake accounts. by people who are just trying to detract from the show and the credible discussions. But one of the things, or a couple of comments were the same. They were trying to equate, and I'll use myself, sort of the subject here, because they were directing this at me. A couple of them, trying to say that I base all of my knowledge on my 2 encounters, and then that's extremely far from the truth. The things I talk about are 46 years, almost going on 47 years worth of talking to thousands of witnesses over the years, thousands of hours of field work. My 2 experiences were just the beginning. They are, what I talk about is not all based on those 2 encounters, what I know, and my sources and all these sorts of other forms of information. So when they try to categorize somebody, and it's not just me, they do it to other people too. When you talk about things from a position of, quote unquote authority, and I can say authority because I've written 8 books, so I guess that gives me a little bit of a foundation, but it's based on a lot of information, not just my 2 encounters. Same with other people who've seen things. When they talk about what they see and knowing what they saw and the different aspects of their encounters, that's a position of knowing. It's not guesswork. It's not speculation. It's what they saw and encountered with their own eyes and ears.
And Will, you had not just those 2 eyewitness encounters, but you've had several other what we call near encounters. I mean, like the time you were at the ranch.
There were a number of peripheral encounters, yes.
Yeah.
So I've experienced things over the years beyond those 2 eyewitness encounters. So, but, I put myself in a hot seat there as the example, but it's not just me. Some of these people go out and they trash other people as well.
Right.
And also, Will, when you talk to those thousands of witnesses and you've, interviewed them, over time, actually very quickly, you begin to see consistency in behaviors.
You build up a lot of information talking to that many people who've had encounters.
Yeah. And what I find so fascinating is a lot of the modern encounters that we read about. If you go back in history and you dig up, they didn't call it Bigfoot, but they had various names for it. I am shocked at, oh my goodness, it's the exact same thing. The creature is behaving exactly the same back in the 1600s, 1700s, a plethora of them in the 1800s and early 1900s. It's the same behavior. And these people did not have Twitter, YouTube, or any other way to communicate. No, they were just discrete individual encounters all throughout the country and up in Canada as well.
That's right. And it's not just when you're talking about those old stories from way back then, even the media, we're talking about the media. You have to look at what the media was during those time periods. In other words, communities really weren't connected news-wise. Word traveled word of mouth. If it was in newspapers, it was big stories like, the Lincoln assassination or something like that. That's the only thing that went out nationally, those really big things. Otherwise, they were local stories, and they really didn't get passed out until the creation of, AP and UPI news services. I think those were after World War II. So all this information was localized, so it couldn't have been passed around that much to create hoaxed situations that were identical. So when you look at... Oh, go ahead, Brian.
Oh, I was going to say, it's not just behavior that people note that's the same, but also just talking to Richard yesterday, I think that you had sent out a drawing that somebody drew in a witness encounter.
Yes.
And Richard said that's exactly what I saw. I mean, he said that's exactly the same face that I saw. It's the same description completely.
Yeah, our artist Justin Mark is working on a new piece right now, and he sent me a partial just to get my opinion. So I sent it out to several close-up witnesses, daylight witnesses, to get their opinions. And in every case, they said it was almost identical to what they saw. It was the best drawing they've ever seen.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, Tom, Justin said we can put that image on the Creek Devil website.
Awesome. Okay, great. It's an incredible picture. So yeah, I'll get that up there.
He's getting ready to go on a trip, so he's trying to complete it. So I don't know whether he will or not before, but you can go ahead and use that image, and if we get the completed one, we can put that up also.
Yeah, and I'll probably use it in multiple places. Might even use it as an icon to, for selection on the website. Yeah, it's a great picture. It's very good.
Well, any more questions, fellas, or?
Well, I want to wrap up with the same thing we wrap up every week, and that is, I thank everybody for their questions, very good questions. So send them in. Any question. There's no bad question, no wrong question, except the one you don't ask. And if you haven't done so already, if you like the show, and you like the content, please consider clicking the subscribe button and then click the bell for updates.
Yeah, like I said, we will be, we are in the process of working on making the show much more refined, better quality for the listeners. So, and we're working also on putting it out for other channels, iTunes, things like that, so to make it more easily available to listeners. So kind of stay tuned for that. We'll announce that as we're able to put those things in place. So more changes coming, folks, better ones, so stay tuned. Sean, any final thoughts, buddy?
Final thoughts. No, thanks for having me again. I enjoy talking. And like I said, anybody out there, anywhere in my region, if you had anything happen to you and you want to talk, please email me at nebraskajrg@gmail. I'll send you my phone number. We can talk. We can have coffee. I'll take you out to where I've seen this thing and some structures that'll just blow your mind. So I'd love to talk to anybody out there.
Brian, any final thoughts?
No, just everybody, thank you for listening. And I guess we'll see you next time.
Tom, anything final?
Just a great show. And Sean, I really appreciate your information, and Brian, yours as well. Always, you have great questions. So, thanks a bunch. Good show.
And we always welcome listener participation, everyone. So, get involved, send us your information, your thoughts, questions especially. And we're looking forward to having more witnesses. So thanks, everyone. Stay tuned for the second portion this week. Will be Jim's narrations. I think he has 3 stories this week. Oh, no, I'm wrong. That's next week. We have one good one this week, I believe. We're also doing a special show with Brenda Harris. We just had her this past week, but next week we're doing a special session with her, so stay tuned for that, and we'll talk again next week.
Welcome. This story is being brought to you by William Jevning and is being narrated by me, Jim Sower. The name of this story is I Met the Abominable Snowman. A true story by Dr. George Moore, M.D. Exclusively published in Sports Afield, May 1957, readers will enjoy this eyewitness novelistic account by the first American to meet face-to-face the mystery animal of the Himalayas, the Yeti. Even without Moore's chance meeting with the mysterious creatures of the Himalayas, the author of this account would have a remarkable story to tell. In October of 1952, Dr. Moore, his wife and daughter, arrived in Nepal. Dr. Moore, as chief of the Public Health Division of the U.S. Operations Mission under the Foreign Operations Administration, was public health advisor to the new Nepalese government that had thrown the doors open of the land to foreigners for the first time since 1816. Dr. Moore pioneered the health program of a country suddenly plummeted into the 20th century. His duties took him on extensive trips into towns and villages never before seen by white men. Moore became fascinated by the customs and habits of the Nepalese people, a people quick to win his lifelong admiration and respect. After his 2-year tour of duty expired, Moore inactivated his commission in the Public Health Service and is at present director of the San Juan Basin Health Unit in Durango, Colorado. The story begins. Monsoon. Heavy gray clouds had been drifting northward from Calcutta for days that June in 1953. Already early rains, warning of what was to come, had soaked the red dust of the Himalayas. The air was clean and cool. Myriads of tiny blue, white, and yellow potentilla has suddenly blanketed the green tundra above the timberline. It was curious how the colors deepened as we descended the slope. White grew highest, then yellow mixed with white, and finally blue flowers dotted the landscape farther down. The rains weren't bad enough to travel in, but at least they were a welcome change from the snow at about 17,000 feet. Gosengkund Pass had been the last high obstacle to Kathmandu on a return trip from the northern border of Nepal. In fact, the day before had seen us sloshing knee-deep in the soft, wet snow. Our coolies suffered the most. Half-naked and barefooted, they had struggled desperately, carrying 80-pound packs on their backs. A Himalayan blizzard is no joke, even for experienced native porters, when slippery rocks and precarious ledges must be climbed. Brooks, Dr. George K. Brooks, an entomologist on our staff, and I were slowly making our way back to our homes in Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal, from a mission of mercy to the Sherpas of the northern country. The government had asked us for help in controlling an epidemic of typhus in Sherpa land, our name for the high Himalayan country close to the Tibetan border. We had been doctors assigned to the job, and now were weary but satisfied that the evil rickettsia were licked for good. We raced to get home before the monsoon whipped us. Black skies, torrents of rain, and foggy, slippery trails on the sides of the mountains obviously held no love for the Himalayan intruders such as we. The country of Nepal divides India from Tibet. Dr. Moore's trip started from Kathmandu north, and the Snowman attack happened on the return journey. It was at 11,000 feet. I remember that we had left Tarkakjang, the last village of the grateful Sherpas. We were heading south now. The foothills of the Himalayas that surrounded Kathmandu, 20 miles away, were visible from the tops of the mountains. This was the area of the home of the gods, a holy place to the natives. Our footsteps followed the same path 2,000 or 3,000 devout Hindus take on the annual pilgrimage to worship in the Himalayan heights. A scant 200 or 300 return from these journeys. The rest die along the way. On our journey up, smoke from countless funeral pyres were a reminder of the rigor and mystery of this area. The trail was less steep now, but slick with red mud. Mossy pines closed over us and thrust their sprawling roots across the way. Bloodthirsty leeches, lurking under the rocks and awakened by our sounds, crawled on our boots and up the coolies' dark nude limbs at every step. Only speed and more speed would enable us to leave this dismal, lonely, God-forsaken range of mountains. Brooks, as we called him, and I pushed as hard and as fast as we dared. Abrasive-soled boots and 6-foot balancing poles cut from the timber enabled us to make excellent time on the ribbon of wet mud. It was not long before we had left the coolies far behind. Not even their cries and shouts could be heard. The forest was deathly still. Fog banks, raw and cold, drifted through the tall pines and left their boughs dripping and slimy. Rounding a sharp turn in the trail, Brooks stopped abruptly. He leaned against a large rock to extract a leech that was at the point of disappearing over the edge of his boot. I stood there watching Brooks and fumbling for my pipe when an almost imperceptible movement in a clump of tall rhododendron caught my eye. Something had moved. I was sure. There it was again. This time a few leaves rustled, more than mere chance could move. Brooks, sensing something was wrong, quickly forgot about his leech. Almost simultaneously, we both slipped our revolvers out of their holsters. On our right, the slope was dangerously steep. Behind us, the slope climbed upward. There was a large boulder by the side of the trail, and we eased over to it, glad for the protection from the rear that it afforded us. We waited, tense and expectant. The stillness was awesome. The fog and mist seemed to form weird shapes writhing and twisting through the dense foliage. Suddenly, from in front of us, a raucous scream pierced the air. Another followed from the right of us. The ghostly quality of the mist and the unreality of the situation had a nightmarish tinge. "God," Brooks whispered, "what was that?" My spine was tingling in high gear now. I gripped my .38 Smith & Wesson more firmly. About 20 feet away, somewhat in front of our rock, was the clump of rhododendron where the first scream broke the stillness. This time it seemed as though it was behind us. "Brooks," I managed to whisper, "let's get on this rock, and hurry." Brooks did not need a second invitation. In an instant we scrambled on top of the massive boulder. From our new perch we carefully searched in all directions for the next move. Our movements must have been closely watched, for a loud chattering immediately assailed us from the bushes in front. The angry chatter filled the raw air as new cries joined in the chorus from all sides. We were definitely surrounded. Brooks muttered, "Oh my God, how many of them are there? And what are they?" We got some idea of what was there when a hideous face thrust apart the wildly thrashing leaves and gaped at us. I shall not long forget the faces. Grayish skin, beetle-black eyebrows, a mouth that seemed to extend from ear to ear, and long, yellowish teeth were nerve-shattering enough. But those eyes, beady yellow eyes that stared at us with obvious demoniacal cunning and anger, that face. Weird ideas were beginning to force their way into my mind. Perhaps, but no, damn it, it has to be. This was the abominable Snowman. A chill sent gooseflesh along my back. The thought of these creatures had often been in my mind when we had trekked over the snows and high places. No European or American had ever proved the existence of the snowmen, although the natives certainly believed in them. Our boys had entertained us many an evening around the campfire with horror tales of the snow beasts, or yeti, as they called them. They told how solitary travelers had been found torn to bits in the vast reaches of the mountains, how huge footprints had been found leading their way from the murders. A few Sherpas had even met the monsters face to face and lived to tell the tale. We considered these accounts unlikely hill stories, although I admit now they had left some effect on us. "No," I insisted to myself, "there is no such creature as an abominable snowman or yeti. This face has to be an ape, or a man, or a demon, or the snowman." A hand pushed through the leaves, then a quick movement and a shoulder. There before us appeared the semblance of a body. Sweat was visible on Brooks's face now, and we crouched lower, hugging the rock for what it was worth. My hands looked white in the semi-darkness. As the creature emerged through the dark leaves, we strained to make out his form. I felt blind panic start through me. Then I stopped. Balls of fire, I thought. I've got to get a grip on myself. The creature was about 5 feet tall, half crouching on two thin, hairy legs, leering at us in undisguised fury. Claws or hands seemed dark, perhaps black, while his bedraggled, hairy body was gray and thin. It shuffled along with a stoop the way a Neolithic caveman might have walked. Well-built and sinewy, it could prove to be the most formidable opponent. Teeth bared, it snarled like an animal. 2 long fangs protruded from its upper lip. Suddenly, a sharp flickering movement behind it caught our eyes. "George! A tail! Look there!" Brooks cried. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind at once. "Well, Brooks," I replied, "this thing could be the abominable snowman, but it also could be an ape. A large langur ape, perhaps." Truthfully, I was more concerned with survival than identification. The band of animals was certainly aggressive, giving every indication that they meant to destroy us. But I couldn't help thinking about the creatures themselves. They didn't look like the common langur monkeys I'd seen in India. At the same time, they had ape-like characteristics. Scientific possibilities crowded their way into my mind even as I checked my revolver for the attack. Higher latitudes, fewer minerals in the water could produce less hair. Lack of heavy timber in the high regions, which would make climbing ability relatively valueless, could produce an erect species. Mutations, the methods by which new species are created, have occurred and are constantly observable in laboratories. Variations within a single species over a period of time can produce animals greatly different from the parent strain. I had no time to share these thoughts with Brooks. The best I could mumble was an unsteady, "Get ready." Other figures were now approaching from several directions. We could make out 6 or 7 of them through the mist. One appeared to be carrying a baby around his neck. They seemed to mean business as they growled at each other. The one that had pushed through the foliage first was the leader. There was little question as to his authority as he led the attack. "Brooks," I said hurriedly, "let's try firing over their heads to see if we can scare them. Don't hit them for heaven's sake, or we may have them in a frenzy. A wounded animal, if they are animals, won't stop. And if they are demons, the Sherpas will never forgive us if we kill them. The Sherpas, superstitious as they are, would rather be killed than offend their gods, especially here." "Okay, George. You say when," he replied softly. Well, we sighted carefully through the fog and waited until the repulsive faces were about 10 feet away. We squeezed the triggers almost together. The blast swirled in the fog in front of us. Splinters of wood and torn leaves fell through the foliage. The creatures stopped abruptly. A deathly, fearsome silence pervaded the darkening air. "Let's give them another one, Brooks," I shouted, more confident now. The second volley resounded, and we were definitely reassured. A third round this time convinced the demons. They turned, howling like wounded coyotes, and fled into the thicket. The excited chattering from the gray gloom told us, however, that they had not gone far. Brooks was reassured. As we reloaded, he asked jauntily, "What's next, George? Shall we attack?" I felt as Brooks felt. We needed to do something, and do it fast. On second thought, however, caution was required. Slowly, I said, "We'll wait it out. I believe until our coolies catch up. We wouldn't have a chance if we moved forward or even tried to make a break. I don't believe that they'll attack the whole party. Our problem now is just how far behind are the coolies. It's getting dark, and these pirates won't miss the chance to eat us alive if I don't miss my guess. In another 20 minutes, we won't be able to see it all." We sank back on the rock and waited there in the twilight, nervous as cats caught up a tree. We listened for the sounds of the coolies, and we listened for the change in the growls from the thicket that might indicate another attack. At this point, we knew the demons were discussing our future and wondering how to play their cards. We tried to joke, but it was corny and useless. We were scared. The fog was unbearable. It penetrated our wet clothes and chilled our bones. I shivered suddenly. The rock was uncomfortable. We squirmed continuously as the rough edges dug into our muscles. Fog, now almost impenetrable, swirled slowly through the black foliage, throwing dark shadows here and there in wraith-like patterns. Grotesque forms appeared and gaped at us, only to disappear and leave our eyes red and tear-stained from strain. Brooks pulled out a cigarette and lit it nervously. I knew he wasn't enjoying it. It couldn't be worth the effort. Perhaps it gave him something to do with his free hand. It was then that I discovered that I was unconsciously clicking the cylinder release on my revolver back and forth. Brooks gave me a dirty look, and I stopped. The chattering and the snarling from the thicket came only intermittently now. I tried to guess the leader's plan. Was he waiting for reinforcements? No, not likely. There couldn't be too many of them in these hills, and this no doubt was the entire pack. Planning to attack? This was more reasonable. No doubt they would hit us in one mad rush. Yes, a single massed attack at the time of their choosing. They would certainly wait until dark, at any rate. Damn those coolies! Where were they? The lazy, unreliable boneheads. Have they bedded down for the night? No, they would want a village with all the comforts attached. They'll come. It was almost dark now. We kept straining to see through the gray mist. We were cold and wet. Our clothes clung to us. A black and yellow striped leech crawling up the rock fastened itself on Brooks's boot. The leech, unsure of its prey, stopped and listened, weaving its upright body slowly in the air. I reached down and plucked it off the wet leather. Half-consciously, I rolled the worm in my fingers, trying to crush it. It was too rubbery. I flung it to the trail in sullen disgust. The chattering around us was growing noticeably louder. Sudden, loud and urgent growls portended something new in the offing. "Brooks, this is it. Shoot to kill this time, and pray." I remember giving him one last look. We had met in Kathmandu only the year before. Already he had become a friend that I could know forever. I cocked the .38 and waited. "George," Brooks whispered excitedly, "they've stopped talking." An uncanny and eerie silence pervaded the air. What was happening? I raised myself a bit higher on the rock. If they were crawling in for the attack, we had to make every shot count. In the bad light, a .38 would not be a very effective weapon, and they wouldn't be afraid this time. But not a movement was discernible. Not a sound could be heard. We waited anxiously, sweat adding to the soddenness of our clothes. "Damn it, George, where are they?" Then a sound from the right, a cracking of a twig. "They're coming down the trail, George. Can you see them?" A form appeared, moving cautiously toward us. There was another. I sighted the barrel of the .38 at the leading figure in the mist. Almost now, a bit closer. "Sahib! Sahib!" a voice called in the darkness. I hesitated a moment and then came to a sudden realization. Brooks! Brooks, it's the coolies! Thank God we're okay now! Shiva! We're here! Shiva! On the rock! Come ahead! Beautiful, lovely Shiva, my Gurkha foreman, boss of the porters, one of the finest men I've ever known, can ever hope to know. A loyal, dependable, quiet little man whose resource and strength lay deep within him. Not on the surface. A look from him had more effect on the Sherpas than a whiplash would have had. For me, he was always there when I needed him. I needed him now. Here he was. "Sahib, you okay? We hear shots. We come up quick." "Oh, God Almighty, we thank you," Brooks murmured. "Yes, Shiva, we are okay now," I said. "Let's go home." My staff and friends back in Kathmandu got quite a laugh when we described our experience on the ridge near Gosingkund. Several wanted to go back immediately, but the monsoon was on us and the torrents made mountain travel out of the question. When the rains had spent their fury, my medical duties took me twice again through the same region. I never saw the animals again. What was it that we saw? A mutant species that man has not yet categorized? Some kind of ape, large, erect, adapted to the high altitudes, made antisocial by its self-imposed isolation, jealous of any invasion of its realm? Perhaps. Or was it an entirely new species, an undiscovered animal, a leftover remnant of prehistoric day, a creature clever enough to elude the curiosity of man, inhabiting an area still almost wholly unpenetrated by even the Sherpas who seldom stray from the time-worn trails? From 1816 to 1951, the country of Nepal, for all intents and purposes, was closed to the outside world. Even today, only a handful of outsiders have explored but a tiny portion of this land. Yet, it was this handful, more interested in climbing mountains than foraging for new species, that brought back tales and evidence of a mysterious creature they call the Yeti. One thing is certain: whatever science will someday discover it to be, the creature humankind has called the Abominable Snowman is there in the Himalayan heights. I know. I met it there on the Pilgrim Trail from Tark Jang. This ends the reading. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open.